practice, you practice, you practice again, and then showtime happens. But that's what doing transformational change work is like, you know? Feeling it through. And I know, based on the title of the presentation and the description, many of you are like, what is she gonna talk about? Don't worry, it'll make sense by the time we reach the end. I am so grateful to be here, so grateful to be invited. I almost want to join the board because I get the emails and I'm like, yeah, join the board of MAE if you haven't done it. And also because I serve on the nominations committee for AEA. If you're interested in AEA board leadership, nominate yourselves too. We need more leadership. It's a great way to meet awesome new evaluators. So just really, really grateful to be here, excited about this conversation, excited about the day together, excited about what we'll talk about, and let's get started. So I want to acknowledge that I am a descendant of anti-Black and Indigenous enslavement, captivity, and genocide on the violently colonized lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Osawa, and Potawatomi peoples, which is where we are right now. And I live every day as a Black woman on the also violently colonized lands of the Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk peoples, many of you know as Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I know it is important for us to acknowledge, and we have been asked by our Indigenous brothers and sisters to acknowledge the land that we're on and what it means for us to be on this land. And I think it's even vitally important that I understand and share with you all that I, as a Black woman, I'm not going to take on the responsibility of whiteness when it comes to relating with Indigenous peoples, right? There's a solidarity that I will continue to practice, and there is work that in BIPOC communities, in particular Black and Indigenous communities, will work on, but white folks have to own what white folks have done. Okay, so I'm not going to take on that mantle. Don't ask any people of color to take on that mantle, but recognize that what solidarity looks like. And also, if you don't know, 2024 is the end of the UN's Decade for People of African Descent. For 10 years, there was an intentional focus by the UN to focus on justice, development, and recognition for African peoples globally. And I think it's important with acknowledgement statements like this to do the work of recognition so that we can name the problems in order to actually solve them, right? As evaluators, which we have agreed to be as we enter this room, we are so often in the position to think about disparities and differences and what's behind them, and we just don't know why is often the question, but we're often skipping past the very clear root problem of enslavement, captivity, and genocide being very core to the fabric of where these programs are. So if we're not talking about those things in our evaluation work, we're doing a disservice to the data, the learning, the organizations, the clients that we work with, because then they're unable to actually deal with the problem at hand. That's what we're working towards. Deal with the issue at hand. So let's go out of our way, be intentional to name the problems that frame our engagements, right? So we start here, who we are, where we're at, and what we're going to do. Lastly, when we're thinking about this, we are also making room for us to disrupt the make-believe piece. The make-believe piece that allows us to go into our organizations every day and pretend everything's okay. And sometimes we don't disrupt the piece because we're tired. Sometimes we don't disrupt the piece because we don't know how. And sometimes we don't disrupt the piece because we have seen what others who have done it before, what's happened to them. And so we need to, and I, saying we, have put myself in a position to make sure that I'm giving voice to the work that we need to do, knowing what has cost others and what it could potentially cost me. If we're not doing that work, then we are not doing our job as evaluators. So no more peace. Peace isn't what we're looking for in our work. We're looking towards getting to liberation. And as evaluators who coach and nurture along the journey of learning, we have some responsibility of building up our knowledge and resources around doing that work, right? So no more peace, Let's get to liberation. That's the background of all this stuff we're about to talk about today.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct?
You can have peace and be enslaved.
Yes. So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer.
Yes, of course.
Okay, then that's what you should talk about, never peace. That's the white man's way of peace. Liberation is our word.
But you're one piece in the end.
Yes, but you can't have peace until everybody's equal.
But you seem free at the moment.
I seem peaceful at the moment.
You seem free.
I seem peaceful.
So this clip has been going around TikTok. It's from a 1968 British documentary called Tell Me Lies. And it's about the Vietnam War. And I don't know the names of all the individuals, but the black man who was speaking in the video is Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, an alum of Howard University, just like myself, who was at one time, this is 1968, in 1969, he becomes the interim chair of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. In 1968, this is when he's working with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and working with SNCC. But I share this because I'm affirming that he said liberation is the answer, right? Like, not peace, not peace. But even more important, towards the end of this clip, this white man says, "Well, you seem free to me." And he responds, "Seem" is important here, but what I'm trying to get you to understand is I'm trying to get towards a liberation. I am not at any sort of peace. And I think it's important for us to flag that because in a lot of instances, and we talked about this in our workshop, where you can mistake a calm demeanor, a politeness, a kindness for everything's okay. And that's not everything's okay. That is, I'm trying to survive in this moment. I'm trying to survive right now. And because surviving right now requires me to use this language and this tone of voice, I'm going to do that. But don't mistake that for what's really going on. Make sure that you understand where I'm coming from. Which goes to the ask that is sort of implicit in what Kwame Ture is saying. He's like, he's asking to be seen. I'm asking you that you actually see me, that you actually hear me, instead of telling me how I seem to you and make that define how I should be behaving in this moment. And it connected me just watching this clip over and over again, reminding us that we need to be not thinking about peace, thinking about liberation. But in her text, Emergent Strategy, which I'm going to refer to several times, if you haven't read it, get to reading it. Who's read it? Okay, A students. Who has it but hasn't read it yet? Oh, okay, B student. Everybody else, get the book. But in this text, as we're talking about emergence and she's focusing on organizing, but so much is relative to our work in evaluation, she says that if we're trying to create the world that we want to see, we have some responsibilities on how we show up. We need to be seen, we need to be heard, we need to ask for what we need, and we need to accept our multitudes. We're gonna get into this a little bit more, but in that clip, you had Kwame Ture asking to be seen and to be heard. That's those first three things checking off the box, and also accepting his multitudes by saying, I understand what it seems like to you, but this is what it is. And so thinking about this, and we're going to get to, can I say again, how alive you being alive makes me feel, this relationship, but I think it's important to ground ourselves in this context, right? You can't solve a problem if you can't name a problem. We're beginning to understand and name that problem. So, at the forefront of what I described as the title of this talk is aliveness. And I consider aliveness as the essential expression of our humanity. That idea of being fully able to do life, right? And this is inspired by Kevin Kwashi's book, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, called Black Aliveness and Being, on the Poetics of Being. And he shares in that book that Black life is so often indexed to death that the idea of Black aliveness is often a disruption to the peace of the world as we understand it. And you might think like, no one, of course I assume you're alive. But when we talk about aliveness, the practice of doing life, how often Black folks are regulated to a space of unaliveness, a space where they're not seen as capable, worthy, or deserving of doing life on their own terms. So when we're talking about aliveness, we're talking about a new baseline for us to think about in terms of our projects that are requiring us to evaluate, especially dealing with disparities, differences related to race and culture, culturally responsive work. A baseline that isn't, are they doing a little bit better in this racist, capitalist, misogynistic world than they were yesterday? And switching it to, what does it mean to fully be alive in this moment? And are we measuring against that? Are we thinking about that? So, this title, Can I Say Again How Alive Your Being Alive Makes Me Feel? This is one of those things that I read and my heart began to sing. Because what kind of expression of love did I come across? Can I say again, repeatedly, one more time, because I can't tell you enough how you being over there, alive, breathing, makes me feel more connected to my ability to breathe and do life. What? I wish somebody felt like that about me. This is from a letter that Barbara Christian, who's pictured here, Black feminist author and poet, wrote to Audre Lorde after her 1978 keynote speech at the Modern Language Association, a very famous speech of hers where she talks about transforming herself in order to better understand herself. And in that note was just an expression of gratitude for Audre Lorde's being from her dear, dear friend. And I read that, and my heart just, I've read it 1,000 times. Every time I say it, my heart sings again. This idea of you being alive makes me feel alive. And so much so that I have to repeat it and remind you because it's just such a beautiful thing to behold, right? And I titled this presentation that around, Can I Say Again How Alive Your Being Alive Makes Me Feel? Because as evaluators, when we're thinking about the measures and the programs that we're engaged in, how often we're not measuring against this type of feeling. This is the feeling that folks should be experiencing in their programs. This is the feeling that leads to transformational change. If someone wakes you up in the morning and says, can I say again how you being alive makes me feel? That's a whole different way to start the day. As opposed to waking up and digesting and another murder has occurred. Or the news that we're currently waking up to about what's happening in Palestine. What does that mean if we start thinking about transformational change on the systems level coming from our everyday interactions with one another? So in this book, Kevin Kwashi says, everything that I might pursue about a concept of aliveness is legible in this sweetness that literary theorist Barbara Christian wrote to poet Audre Lorde after Lorde's presentation at the 1978 MLA convention. Can I say again how alive your being alive makes me feel? Here in this declaration, aliveness is constituted in repetition and therefore is unfurling, an experience one encounters rather than possesses, a relational capacity manifested through the speaking of one's sensibilities, her feeling, her intelligence. And okay, great, right, nice, but what does this have to do with evaluation? But it's very simple because we need to understand our measures better. We need to understand our measures better. We need to think about success more thoroughly, more deeply, more resonant to actually being alive in this world, not just a little bit better than the barely surviving that we were in yesterday. And this is challenging, right? because we're working with programs and grants that are asking us to prove that we moved a mountain with $10, which is often what our $10 is what you need to move an entire mountain. And then somehow we eloquently write with data that we collected that you can in fact move a mountain for $10. And then, because we did it for 10, someone else is like, I bet you can do it for 8. And then it's like, yes, now I can also prove I can move 2 mountains for $8. I wrote it up. Look at how great this program is. This cycle that we're stuck in as evaluators, we have to start disrupting. We have to disrupt it. Because we know moving a mountain for $8 is not a success measure for aliveness. At your most alive, you're not scraping for change at the bottom of a bag. At your most alive, you're not stressed out by doing the work of 17 people as one person. As you're most alive, you're not scared to tell people the truth, because if you told them the truth, they would cut your funding and then you wouldn't have a job, and then how you tell your partner that, that's not where most alive is. But often that's the work that we're doing. So again, can I say how alive your being alive makes me feel? So I'm bringing in John Henry Clark, a scholar and historian, one who was a teacher, one of my favorite teachers, who reminds us that history is a time clock that lets us know our time of day, right? And it lets us know that where we are in time, and more importantly, what we must be because of what time it is. The events that transpired 5,000 years ago, 5 years ago, or 5 minutes ago have determined what will happen 5 minutes from now, 5 years from now, or 5,000 years from now. All history is a current event, which is why we started where we started, right? Just so happens, I love history, and every time I speak, I always go look up that date in history just to see. I have yet to stand in front of a group of people and not see a day where something atrocious has happened to Black people in history on that day. I bring you May 10th, 1740. On this day, the Negro Act became law. The Comprehensive Negro Act of 1740 passed in South Carolina made it illegal for slaves to move abroad, assemble in groups, raise food, earn money, learn to write English. Move abroad. How do you move abroad from when you were abroad? You were moved abroad to be here. So you're basically saying you can't go home. You can't gather in groups like these tables we're sitting at, where you found people that were, connected to the work that you do, and you comfortably sat down to engage in a conversation. Don't do that. Don't raise food to sustain yourself. Don't earn money to participate in this world. Or learn to write English. Ironically, reading is not included in there, and I think that was just because those law writers at the time were too stupid to understand that reading would get you a lot further than writing. But that's May 10th, 1740, this moment in time that we're experiencing right now, and understanding that additionally, in this same law, it gave permission for slave owners to kill rebellious slaves is necessary. Written in the law. You're seeing an example, it's long, but that's an example right here. This law, passed in South Carolina, became the basis for a lot of the slave codes that were passed in the South. Georgia made one immediately after. Several other local communities made their own in order to support this. Slave codes existed prior to this time because of 1740. We're pretty deep into the colonial project by this time, but this represented a change in the tide, for it added this proponent about killing slaves if necessary. Now remember, all history is a current event. And if the initial political system that built this country has codified in its systems things such as the Negro Law of 1740, how are we creating from it something that allows me to be fully seen as a descendant of said system as fully alive? Right? All history is a current event. So, this title, Afrofuturist, Intimacies, and Systems Level Evaluation. We built the premise around aliveness and understanding aliveness and its relationship to our work as evaluators. But now I'm going to break apart each of these things: Afrofuturism, intimacies, system level, and evaluation. And then we'll open it up for some conversation, right? Black humanity and personhood continue to be filtered and evaluated through the white liberal imagination. Now this book that I took this from, written by Samunzi and Anderson, As Black as Resistance, is really about Black political science studies. That's where you would find it. But I found this quote in there, and I said, this is so relevant to the work that I do and the communities that I work with. Because we have to, in light of us talking about this conversation of aliveness, understand that all of this work about what is expected of Black humanness in practice is filtered through and evaluated through the white liberal imagination. And the white liberal imagination isn't just white folks. The white liberal imagination is the things that we're taught in our higher education systems, right? So all of us, through some regard, and not just those systems, it's also taught in our media, it's in our news, it's on our TikToks, it's everywhere. That white liberal imagination is defining what it means for us to understand the humanity of other folks. I didn't put this clip in, but are you familiar with the show, the social media YouTube show Hot Ones, where they eat the hot chicken wings? If you haven't, add it to your things to watch when I have nothing else to do list. But the premise is this guy interviews celebrities, actors, comedians, all politicians, all kind of famous people, while they're eating progressively hotter chicken wings. The hot sauce gets hotter and hotter, and the questions get deeper and deeper. And there's an episode of Hot Ones with Sterling Brown, who was Randall from This Is Us. I'm channeling all my TV knowledge here. He's playing a lot of other things, but I feel like that's what people know him most as. So Black man who has a very established acting career. And so he's eating the chicken. He's like, this chicken is good. He's really enjoying it. A question comes from the interviewer about, like, how does it feel to know that you're getting written off of like a TV show or a movie, like your character will come to an end. And he's eating and he pauses for a moment. He was like, I'm a Black actor. I die on screen a lot. And he says it like he's kind of joking when he says it. And I shared this with my team when we were reading the book, and I'm like, that's how ingrained Black unaliveness is. He knows that, like, that's his role. Like, I have to repeat on screen over and over Black death. I live that. So it's almost of no consequence to me at this point. He doesn't even think about it. And I bring that up. There's a lot of work. There's another book, Red, White, and Black, that talks about race and representation in media studies. But what it does to our psyches to have an entire media industry that routinely kills Black people for entertainment. Now, these are some of my favorite movies. I'm not even talking about what we would consider violent and gory. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just our everyday run-of-the-mill rom-coms where all of a sudden this Black guy died. And that's just a part of the story. And I bring that up in here because Black humanity and personhood are filtered through and evaluated through the white liberal imagination, so much so that we've made it a part of what it means to be entertained at this point. And if that's true, how does that seep into our work as evaluators in ways that we might not be conscious of? Because I love that movie, whatever movie, insert movie here. I love that show, whatever show, insert show in. But in it, if you take a step back, how often do you see Black folks die in that? There's studies about the ways in which you see Black folks die on screen in comparison to their white counterparts and what it looks like. One of the most notable ones that I'm not sharing these images intentionally, but is when someone is murdered by the police. Murder by the police happens to everyone. It happens exponentially higher to Black and Indigenous folks. However, when you see news stories, the likelihood of you seeing the black body sprawled on the ground is exponentially higher than you see any other body sprawled on the ground. Which is why we have a different conversation about anti-black violence in the police, because the visibility is way different. But the expectation is also we're not covering up that body. I'm sure many of us can, in our back of our minds, without me actually painting the picture of you, can see Michael Brown, can see Eric Gardner, can see Trayvon Martin, because those images were given to us. But if I share some of the names of other non-black people killed by the police, they'll be like, well, I can see their faces because it's like their yearbook photo that was shared, right? That practice, socially, has to be something we question as evaluators. We have to question how it might be seeping into our work. The ways in which we're making exceptions for Black death to be something expected, warranted, not challenged. And how we might need to think differently when it comes to our program evaluation, what it means to be thinking about these disparities. What else is showing up? What else is not being called out? What does that feel like for us? And so the reason I talk about Afrofuturism is that my call to arms right now is that we embody an Afrofuturist practice. An Afrofuturist practice where we define Afrofuturism as having the audacious belief that Black people exist in the future unencumbered by anti-Black racist attitudes. To be Black and alive. What happens if I start thinking about my work as an evaluator, wanting to say, like, I can actually, in this work, think about Black aliveness, and it might affirm some of the practices I'm already doing, or raise some new questions I haven't yet to consider. What it's not gonna do is make your work invalid. What it's not gonna do is all of a sudden say, now I'm answering questions that are unrelated to this work. What it's gonna do is deepen your practice. What it's gonna do is add rigor. What it's gonna do is increase your capacity to be an evaluator. So I'm gonna quickly just mention some of the considerations and the connections between Afrofuturism and evaluation, and we'll get to the intimacy part. When we define evaluation, we're asking ourselves to consider new possibilities. The new possibility I'm offering you is a world where Black people are unencumbered by anti-Black racism. Imagine, right? And if we're thinking about evaluation as the opportunity to learn something new, to gain a new insight, why can't I carry that thought right along next to it? Makes sense, it's a natural fit. Second, the evaluation process is non-linear and iterative, as in we all, everyone, can talk about the evaluation plan we wrote out and then the evaluation we did, right? The evaluation we did was like this, even though you asked me to write an evaluation plan that went like this. And the connection to Afrofuturism is thinking about the world connecting to African aesthetics and African practices, which life is cyclical, not linear. So the practice is actually aligned to thinking about all history as a current event. A way of conceptualizing African Black aliveness has always worked like this. So my practice actually affirms that if I actually take the time to make that known. 3, evaluation as a profession is deeply entangled with white dominant cultural norms in ways that many Black, Indigenous, and people of color have identified, yet are also complicitly engaging within because of our present reality. Because we're evaluators in this same social context, in this same world, that means that even I, as a Black evaluator, am guilty of perpetuating this harm. In order for us to do something about it, I can't be the only one who takes on the Afrofuturist view. I need, in solidarity, that to come from everyone as well. That allows us to start thinking about how do we move it from this is this little champion thing that this Black girl on stage said to this is a movement that's within our profession that's causing a change in how our system works, right? 4, Afrofuturism deepens our engagement with culturally relevant evaluation, critical race theory. I bring this up because one of my favorite things to do, to talk about allyship and accompliceship and co-conspirators. And my feeling is the best way to practice solidarity is to mind your business deeply. The best way to be in solidarity is to mind your business deeply. It's less about, can you do what I'm doing over here as someone in a particular movement? It's more about understanding where you are in this moment so well that you understand the relationship to your being to that problem over there. That's the ask. So Afrofuturism offers us the opportunity to mind our business deeply and say, in relationship to anti-Blackness in this world, what's my relationship to it? Do I understand it? Do I see how it can creep in? Do I understand how I'm unaware? Do I understand what I still need to learn? So then I can begin to do that work. It's not for you, anyone who identifies as non-Black, to then say, well, I started a protest and marched down the street in the name of Black lives. That's nice, but I ask you to mind your business deeply. It's not on the street, it's in your house. Go to dad's. 5. We still got a lot more to talk about, okay? So don't quit me yet. Number 5, Afrofuturism is critical. It's a critical standpoint, a critical frame, because we know that there's no such thing as neutral. And I say that in particular as we're disrupting white supremacist dominant attitudes. There's no such thing as neutral in our space, and there's definitely no such thing as race neutral. Period. There is no such thing that you're engaging that's race neutral. Now, race ignorant, race avoidant, sure. But there is no such thing as race neutral. And if we're going to take an Afrofuturist perspective where we're thinking about the future, where Black people are unencumbered by anti-Black racism, then we must know in this current moment, there's a role I have to be aware of in terms of my relationship to race. Where do I stand? What does that look like for me? What do I still need to learn? Number 6, Afrofuturism is human-centered, focused on people, how people are understanding the world around them, how they're interpreting the world, how they see themselves in it. Afrofuturism is more than an aesthetic, and it's an epistemological frame. You can learn so much about Afrofuturism in terms of galaxies far, far away and cool colors looking, like this gentleman on the screen. But it's also about a way of knowing. A way of knowing. If we are practicing with the Afrofuturist frame, we're understanding that there's a way of knowing the world that matters because of how race impacts our view of experience. And so we are adding that in here as an epistemological frame. Afrofuturism connects complexity science and emergence theories to equity and inclusion without limiting the understanding to what has already been determined as true. It gives us space to imagine new possibilities, to think about the world not as it is, but as something we can't believe exists. It's a radical idea to imagine Black people unencumbered by anti-Black violence. That's a radical idea to practice that. And so it gives us the complexity, the language, and the emergence to start practicing that with our work. Afrofuturism furthers the challenge of engaging positionally in reflexivity and culturally responsive evaluation by centering Blackness as a catalyst for change instead of as a response to whiteness and its positionality. So much of what we read about a Black attitude towards a practice, i.e. Black evaluation or a Black framework, Black feminist epistemology, it's in relationship to what whiteness has already called a thing. So whiteness has called it this. So now we're going to look for a way for us to blacken it up. And that happens a lot in communities of color as we enter into the scholarly realm. Think of ways how do we do this, adding our space to it so we can be in this room, but talk in our language, but actually it's responding to how whiteness is situated this all the time. Afrofuturism is saying, well, let's put whiteness to the side and start imagining life without it. What would that look like for us? What will we feel? And last but not least, evaluative thinking through Afrofuturism challenges fundamental context, attitudes, and beliefs that make for rigorous evaluation practice. When we don't put these questions at the center, we're denying the rigor that the programs that we're evaluating for the communities that we're working with need and deserve. We're trying to increase our rigor, not make it easier for us to avoid what critical questions would help us discover new learnings. So that's real quick, that was just the Afrofuturist part, which reminds us, I love this quote, all social justice is science fiction. All social justice is science fiction. All social justice is science fiction. The ability to imagine, create anew, think creatively, use innovation, it's all what we want in all of the social justice work that we're doing, all of the equity work that we're doing, all of the culturally responsive work that we're doing. And it's science fiction because we need to start imagining something that's way out there so we can start going towards a world we haven't figured out how to live in yet. If we keep focusing on this world, we're gonna just keep reinscribing the problems of it over and over again in new patterns, okay? Racism 3000.6, like we don't need that version. Let's think about a whole new system in which we're operating within. So then we go from Afrofuturism to the intimacy part. What does intimacy around this work look like for us and why is it necessary? Two big reasons. One, radical honesty. And this again comes from emergent strategy. Radical honesty, no omissions, no white lies, no projections. Ask the questions you really want answered. Speak your truth and let the relationship build inside all that reality. Just a note from experience, the small lies can be the hardest to stop telling. No, I don't want to get on the phone right now. Can we just text? I'm busy catching up on my reality TV show. Real cow milk ice cream is what I want. Don't get that vegan stuff out of here. Or, I know I said I didn't want to, but now I do. However, the more you practice this, the more you will find yourself spending your waking hours in the ways you want to, the ways that honor the miracle of your existence, aliveness, which was not given to you to waste in polite avoidance of hurting people's feelings. Hello, Midwest nice teas. You will find that you can be honest and kind. You can be honest and compassionate. Radical honesty. No omissions, no white lies, no projections. Most importantly, as evaluators, ask the questions you really want answered. Ask the questions you really want answered. At Ubuntu Research and Evaluation, when we have our initial client meeting, that first kickoff meeting, the number of times, let me just say, our standard practice is asking at least 3 times, what is the actual question that you want answered? Then they give you something that was in the RFP, and it's like, what's the actual question you want answered? And then they say something, and it's like, that has nothing to do with what you put in that RFP, but that's actually what you want to know. You wanted me to answer this question over here because you felt like the answer to that question you would utilize to answer this question over here, instead of just asking this question. The thing about questions, you ask questions because you don't know. But so often, the client's asking us to ask questions that they do know the answer to. Because they're afraid of what they don't know. And they actually don't want you to do the work of finding out something that they're not prepared to deal with. But because we're using this Afrofuturist frames and we're not afraid and we're not moving with any sort of fear towards our own intimacies, we're moving with a new sense of radical honesty. So we're going to ask the questions that we really want answered. What do we get to generate as evaluators when that actually happens? Insights that will actually create the change on the very micro level that will be most helpful for us on the macro level? We're evaluators, not rocket scientists, but it's actually that easy. It's that easy. If we're honest with each other, what can we begin to generate? Next to that is radical vulnerability. An essential requirement for journeying together as co-authors in a political landscape, which all evaluations are a part of a political landscape, disfigured by non-stop epistemic violence. This co-authorship, the one that you're on with you and your client, hinges on sharing authority through a situated solidarity, minding your business deeply, that derives its meanings from its groundedness in place, time, and struggle, understanding history as a current event, and that continuously strives for radical love through the dissolution of egos. We're going to be honest with each other and then invulnerable about where we are, what we don't know, what we haven't had a chance to learn yet, the fact that book is on the shelf and I haven't cracked it open, that I know I've heard that I should be more versed in this, but I haven't had a chance to study it. I'm tired. I haven't had a chance to. I want to know that, but I don't. That vulnerability we're often scared of. We're scared of what's gonna happen to us when we admit where we really are. But the thing is, as long as we keep pretending, we're preventing ourselves from doing the work necessary to create the systems transformation we seek. Because all of this, all history is a current event, but all of the information that we share and withhold has an impact on the information that we seek out and interpret. We're just a representation of what it's like to get information in this world. In Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Marie Brown also reminds us that everything is data. Everything is data. And if we're not picking up on all the things around the context, the politicized context of all of our evaluation work, we're actually denying ourselves the opportunity to provide the recommendations and learnings that will actually get us to the systems transformation we're looking for. That's what we're thinking about. And so the intimacy is this radical honesty and radical vulnerability that is required for us to ask the questions we really need to ask, to think about the things that we haven't had a chance to engage the topics that we've been afraid of, right? Be seen, be heard, ask for what you need, accept your multitudes. You saw that practice in Kwame Ture in that TikTok, but then the ask is, are you willing to do it yourself? Are you willing to be seen? Are you willing to be heard? Do you actually ask for what you need? And that could be anything from more time to get this done to, I need to research and better understand this particular concept I haven't had a chance to. Or you've hired me as an evaluator on this particular project, but I need to consult somebody from this community in a way that's much deeper than I anticipated, because I need their insights to actually give you meaningful work. And I'm gonna make sure that our work reflects that, our budget reflects that, because it's necessary. When I bypass that, I'm giving you something that's not rigorous. I'm giving you something that's not thorough. I'm giving you something that's inauthentic to what the evaluation could really be telling us. But I have to be radically open and honest to say that I need that kind of assistance. Also, this wasn't in my notes, but I might as well say it since we're here. That means sometimes I'm not the right evaluator for the project. And can I say that? And can I also admit I'm not the right evaluator and I haven't built the relationships I should, so I actually don't even know who the right evaluator is. But it's not me. Be seen, be heard, ask for what you need, and accept your multitudes, right? So that's Afrofuturism, that's intimacy, systems level. Structures, pathways, systems. Structures, pathways, create the systems. The structures being institutions, organizations, all of these things that hire us, contract with us, seek us out to ask questions. The wrong ones most of the time, but those are the ones who are giving us the opportunity to do the work that we do. And usually through that work, we're looking at those pathways to answer those questions. The program they put out, the policy in action, the ability to scope out the relationship between that evaluation and that evaluation, the learning that might need to take place in order to strategically place an organization in a space for them to make a change they want to do. And those things in relationship to one another, in which we play a role, create the systems. So if there's racist structures and racist pathways, racist systems. There's sexist structures with sexist pathways, sexist systems. If there's hateful structures with hateful pathways, hateful systems. There's not a way to put one of these out and think that everything else will equal up on the end. These things are all together, right? You can't be like, well, that's an anti-racist organization. They just have some racist programming. What? But that is often how a lot of these things are situated. This organization, yeah, historically, it's terrible. You know, we have the pride trans flag on our website, but if you work here, it is really not that safe for queer people. But we have this queer program for youth over here that's about like 10% of our budget. That's really, really great. It's really awesome. So like, look, we're doing it. What? It's queer-phobic structures, has queer-phobic pathways. It means it's a queer-phobic system. That's an isolated event. That's an episode. That's get a gold star. Yeah, you did that over there. But that doesn't change our systemic view. So we're thinking about systems level transformation. We gotta think about these institutions themselves and the pathways that connect them, which is less about thinking about how do I create a new pathway or how do I change this structure. It's saying that this whole thing, as it works together to support itself, as it works together to sustain itself, is the problem. It is the problem. And I can weed around this system all I want, but it's going to continue to produce this system. So our question is, how do we create liberated structures with liberated pathways to create liberated systems? Those are the questions that we have to raise in our systems level transformation work. Those are the questions that we have to raise as evaluators. It's not a presumption that what's working as it is the best situation towards our collective liberation. It's an assumption of it's probably built within this problematic system. We need to start moving with that assumption more intentionally with our work. We need to stop being afraid of the racist word. Things can be racist and you can still go to the dinner with your husband later on. That's fine. It's okay. We can say white supremacy, and we can also laugh at something that we heard when we were driving home from school. That's fine. For some reason, we get so afraid of this language and these words that we don't use it, because if we use it, then it will fundamentally shake up who we are as human beings. But even if we don't use the words, it still exists. The racist system is still a racist system, even though you're like, it's not as friendly to Black people as we would like it to be. We are working on our equity practice. We really would love a more culturally responsive, but we just don't know racist system still, right? And this is important because what we practice at the small scale sets the patterns for the whole system. If we are not putting ourselves in the position to ask ourselves the right questions that we really need answers to in relationship to this anti-Black, violent, capitalist, misogynistic, queer-phobic world, how are we ever going to be responsible for asking the systems that are in place the critical questions that need to be asked from them? The work of systems level transformation isn't how do I become the president of said organization or executive director of said organization in order to make a change that people will feel. It's about your journal at night. It's about the conversation you have with your partner on the pillow. It's about what's in your head as you're leaving the grocery store. It's very small. Systems level transformation is right here. It's the everyday things that we participate in that we need to bring more critical questions, thought, and imaginations to that will lead to systems transformation. Systems transformation is not beyond us. Systems transformation is not out there. Systems transformation is not only in the pockets of the Ford Foundation and Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Systems transformation is not only with the feds. Systems transformation has everything to do with our individual interactions with ourselves, then the people we're closest to, then the people we meet outside on the street. That's where the work is. That's how the change happens. That's what will make the world different. So lastly, yes, timing's great, and we could talk a little bit. So lastly, we're thinking about, okay, so what does that mean for me as an evaluator? We're thinking about embracing a complex sense of self-awareness. Know who you are. Know who you are. And who we are is a forever developing and growing project, so that means we have to routinely revisit, who am I right now? Practicing radical empathy, spontaneous without contingency empathy. Asked evaluators yesterday, and a number of people said their defining practice of their work as evaluators is empathy, and that's great. We need more of that, right? We need to place tangible value on relationships. If I was talking to a room full of organizers, which is the other space that I often speak in, I'll think about, like, are we actually thinking about the containers in which we build relationships with one another in? All relationships, all of them. Mentor-mentee relationships, teacher-student, employee-employer, peers. Are we thinking about those containers intentionally and making sure that they are safe, that they're honest, that they're vulnerable, that they're transparent? Because those are the things we need in order to lead to the systems level transformation we seek. Challenging one's own beliefs despite good intentions. Reflecting on the why past desire and being open to seeing something different than you have understood and accepted it. Our good intentions aren't enough. We have to question some of those and be okay with challenging those things. Redistributing power, making space and accepting one's reality without imposing a personal desire for gain or comfort. I'm the wrong person for you to be talking to, and unfortunately, I've not done the work necessary to know who you should be talking to. Full stop. Or I would love to be a part of this work, but I really think the best person you should be talking to is this person. And I know you're choosing me because you're comfortable with me, but this is the person who's going to give you the answers that you actually seek out. That's okay. That's okay. So last, not least, Afrofuturist intimacies and systems level evaluation. You need to position yourself. Who am I on this time and space continuum right now? I'm listening deeply to what's being said and what's not being said. I'm building a context of my evaluation work based on aliveness, particularly for the most marginalized beneficiary in the project that I'm working in. Relentlessly imagine the future without oppression. Just like wake up and imagine, like, what would life be like if I didn't have to like go to work today? And I need more of that. How do I work towards more of that? You know? So, we can just make it real. We need to work on collectively, you and me, right? On imagining a world where I'm not tired. That's it. Like we're not even getting to all that other stuff yet. Isms and its exist, and a lot of it could be addressed if we woke up every day saying, I want to imagine a world where I'm not tired, and I'm going to start working towards that. If you and I started committing to that, we would actually get a lot of this work done. Move with honesty and vulnerability, even when it hurts, it's uncomfortable, and you don't want to do it. Ooh, be seen, be heard, that's fine, but like, I don't want to be seen and heard right now. Don't look at me, don't listen, just ugh. Yeah, in those moments, that's especially when you need to be seen and heard. Because it's about building our collective capacity to understand the humanness, the aliveness in all of us. And our moments where we need to be seen and heard are often the ones where we're not our best selves. Not the ones that we like to promote, not the Instagrammable version. Uproot systems and build new connections. New ones. Brand spanking new ones. Ones that we never would have thought existed before. Ones that we were intimidated to engage. Ones that we're like, I'm curious if that'll work. Those are the ones we need to be thinking about. And use evaluation as a tool for change in the small moments to set new patterns for the entire system. It's everything from your client is consulting to you about how they should word the RFP. It is telling a client that I know timeliness is of the essence right now, but taking our time on this will help us actually do this the way it needs to be done. It is saying, I need to run this survey through some folks who engaged this community before, because even though I've taken all the survey methodology classes and watched the YouTubes and then did the AEA coffee talk and also watched the webinar, I still need to connect with someone who's worked with this community previously to understand that this is actually the right approach I should be taking. I'm gonna put myself in the position to be open for whatever criticism they might be giving to me. Think about the very small moments. The small moments in our evaluation where we make decisions that go against change and reaffirm the system that it is. When we acquiesce to the things that have been harmful, when we move with the speed of whiteness, when we don't think about what it means to build a relationship, when we diminish our truth a little bit those are the moments that will help us actually build towards the systems level transformation we seek. And last but not least, I love being an evaluator. I love this work. I love what I've been able to do, where I've been able to connect, the places where it's allowed me to journey. And I honestly feel this sense of aliveness by being able to engage with people around this. To say, like, we can think about the world being different. We can make change if we actually have a conversation about this. That makes me feel alive. So I'm telling you all in this moment, I want to remind you that your aliveness in this work, committed to this type of change, makes me feel more alive. Your commitments to it help me continue to do my work. Your willingness to journey, your willingness to struggle helps this work to be better for all of this. And so I am thankful to be in a community of practitioners who are thinking about this. And so I routinely want to wake up, engage, be on webinars, and say to you all, can I say again how alive your being alive makes me feel? Thank you. Talking, there's directions. Ebony, thank you. Thank you, Ebony, for like handling all of my nonsense.
So, you've been talking a lot throughout this presentation about the importance of having discussions with your clients around the issues of oppression and those kinds of things. Well, we know that recently there's been a lot of issues of certain groups banning those kinds of discussion from taking place. So how do we as evaluators handle working with clients when they won't allow those kinds of conversations to take place?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, that's a really good question. And most of this, in my experience, and again, there might be incidents where this hasn't been true, but most of this is they are banning or preventing conversations about particular topics. And so if you say certain keywords, that's like, we don't talk about that here. And so it's less about the keywords and more about the principles behind not having a conversation, right? And so you're telling me that you don't talk about X, Y, and Z? Say queer phobia at your job. I'm not going to engage you in a conversation about my queer life experiences at that moment. What I am going to say, though, is like, tell me more about what it's like to have a conversation in your organization. When people have problems, what occurs? But tell me more about that. When someone has something that happens and they don't like it, what happens? Can you tell me? Can you draw it out for me? Are you willing to just walk me through that? Because I'm just unclear. So I move away from the topic, right? Because the topic becomes just an easy out, and more about what's the practice behind it, which is often very simple. A communication thing, a leadership thing, a management thing, an organizational thing. And it's like, well, that's what you hired me to talk about. So let's talk about that. I can extrapolate all the other things. Because you're not talking to an organization in which, oh yeah, we have great communication processes, and they don't want you to talk about Palestine. That just, no, it's not happening. And so the diversion is into these core things around change, communication, leadership, management. Let's talk about those things, because that is just going to represent the problem that you're actually going to be able to address. Now, the other thing I will add to that, I think it's really important, is that no one's hiring Ubuntu in research and evaluation and don't want to talk to a Black person, right? So then it's just, you go to our website, it's just a bunch of Black people just jumping around, loving life, and like red, black, and green are our colors. Our name is Ubuntu. Like, you kind of know what you're engaging. when you sign up to work with us. So that allows for a different kind of conversation. And that's not to say that everyone's ready for the conversations we want to have, but I encounter this more when we're part of larger evaluation teams. And that's when I have to do the work, because now I'm also, it's not my organization, I'm not the leadership of the team. I'm sort of like, I need to get this conversation here and that through the team into the client. And what does that work look like? Which still is the same thing around these core concepts around communication, management, leadership. Every time we go back to those, we're getting into the root of the issue. And more often than not, the problematic language comes bubbling up to the top because it becomes the example of what folks are engaging. So flip it around, focus on those core things. And I understand I speak from a place of special privilege here, because if you're hiring Monique Liston, you kind of know what you're engaging.
Thank you.
This is fun.
So I heard you talk a lot about tiredness, and I'm too tired to do this. I feel like I've been at a point in my career where it's just like I am so exhausted pushing up against certain things and pushing up and continuing to push, especially when it comes to data collection, because that's my methodology or forte, whatever. How can you expand more on that tiredness and what that means to you, how you feel it, and like how to combat it?
Yeah.
I would also add the question, can you expand our imaginations on how you fight against tiredness?
Ooh, yeah. That's the more fun question. But that's really real. So we have a practice and in our organization around beloved community as the container in which we do all of our work. And every week, a member of our team facilitates us in a conversation. And a couple weeks ago, one of the team members facilitated the conversation. The title was, "Are you too tired for beloved community?" We all just entered the Zoom like, are you saying I'm too tired to do my job? But it was a wake-up call around how much we fight through our exhaustion without addressing it, right? And so I think the first thing is like, we can't solve a problem we can't name, right? And like, what am I actually tired of? A lot of us, I mean, we're evaluators, we're data geeks, nerds, all of that. So it's like, we're not actually tired of doing that stuff. There's a thing, a practice, a process that I'm actually tired of. And I need to start being able to name that, right? Secondly, I think in that tiredness is where it becomes really important for us to practice solidarity with other evaluators. Because more than likely, we have a peer evaluator who is jumping into an aliveness around that area right where we're tired. And we need to tap into them. We need to be in better relationship with one another, right? Like, I express the tiredness around dealing with foundations, but how am I gonna keep my business open, right? But in that moment, I did reach out to a colleague like, yo, this is exhausting, I don't wanna do this. And they're like, here's why this is exciting and why you're needed in here. And I needed that voice to be mirrored back to me. So that like reinvigorated me, like, oh yeah. I got this. I think the other thing, and this relates to the secondary question, is we need to change our practice, right? We need to be quiet or loud. Be loud if you want, just inviting quietness if you want that. Resistors to capitalism and capitalist pressures, right? And there's some practical things that I have learned. I know Nikki Bowman was the keynote speaker last year. Colleague, friend was texting her this morning. And there's one thing that I learned from her that I utilize now all the time, and that's my email away message is up more than not. More than not. Because the pressure is, okay, so like I'm here with you all, I was here with you all day yesterday and today. These are work days, and there's pressure to like stay up till 10:30 and answer all the emails that came in through the day, so you work today. But like, I was working all day. Why did I create 2 work days in one? Stop doing these 2-for-1 specials. If I was doing data collection all day, that was my work for the day. Tomorrow I will get to these emails, and even though the work that we do is vitally important for our communities, no one is dying because we didn't answer that email. not it, right? There's no such thing as an evaluation emergency. There is no such thing. There's no like, we need a question here, stat, like that's not gonna occur. And we should move like that, right? We should move like that. The sun will come up if I don't answer this email. Food will still go. Like, we are not stopping any of these things. And the person on the other end, no, you're not gonna die. The sun is still gonna come up. And I'm gonna engage it honestly. Like, I really wanna honor your question. I don't have time to do that today. I'm gonna do it tomorrow. Looking forward to meeting with you, you know? And pointing to that question, institutionalizing or making part of our work rest. So in our organization, we have each quarter a mandatory rest day. As in, and I say it repeatedly to my staff, this is not a day for you to make all your appointments and run all your errands. Your job today, as in instructed to do, is to sit your ass down. Rot in your bed. Order DoorDash and do no labor. That is your job. Prescription. That's what you're doing. Very hard for people to do. Like, they fight me more on that than anything else. Sleep, I said, and it's like, but no, I wouldn't. But like making it a part of the schedule and calendar, not like a surprise thing, because the surprise thing is how you lean into like using it for other stuff. But it's like, everybody knows on the fourth Friday of the quarter, we have a mandatory rest day. And I'm gonna engage you about what's your rest gonna look like. What pajamas are you about to wear? Tell me about it. You know, we're institutionalizing rest, making it part of our practice. Also, we have a practice, a collective nap practice, where one of our director of facilitation and leadership talks about like the power of a nap, what naps can do, and we'll have an hour meeting on the calendar, and it's for you to take a 30-minute nap. Do it. Now, I know a lot of our stay-at-home friends and colleagues are like, yeah, I nap all day.
30 minutes, that's it?
Right. Like, I'm napping since I got up this morning. But the reason that it's different or it's disruptive is because we're making a part of our work schedule a calendar. And it's not subversive. You're not doing something naughty, right? And you're doing it in such a way like it's intended to build and strengthen an actual practice. What does it look like for you? I know I'm not a napper. Like, I lay down and it's like 4 hours pass. Like, napping is not a skill that I have. But consider napping a skill for you, your team, to build. A power nap, for real. Do I understand the science behind naps? We did a whole little like understanding nap science and then said, okay, now, you know, data nerds, y'all wanna know the why behind everything, right? We explored that why, learned a little bit about it, gave a facilitated time and a tool. Like, there's tools to help you do that nap. And if you don't fall asleep, maybe you've done a meditation during that time. It's a whole process that you put together. But then it's like, we come back and every single time people are like, oh, I needed that. I didn't know I needed that, but I feel a lot better. And now I have some questions because now my head's clear. Let me talk to you about, and it's not, we're not resting for productivity's sake, but it makes it a lot easier for us to engage with one another. So make rest a part of the work, right? Don't make it as something, you know, as an educator, if anybody teaches, best advice they gave to me is like, when I'm doing my syllabus, go ahead and put that rest day on the calendar for you and your students. No class today, because your assignment is to lay down. You know, there's not a field where there's not a field or a class where a student doesn't need that. Not a field or a class that you teach where you don't need that. You know, and I hope that in 20 years someone hears me saying this and says how ridiculous that I had to schedule a nap in my team's calendar, and it's like so embedded. But like, here's the small resistance that we need to do now to make that work. Sorry, I'm still talking.
So I have a quick question about the concept of, this is like really echoey / loud, of minding your business deeply. So like I kind of get what you're saying, but I don't totally understand what you're saying. And do you have more references of where to read more about that?
No. I mean, I don't know if I'm saying it, right? Like I'm telling you to mind your business, but the premise is, instead of worrying about how to perform for someone else, worry about where your life is in relationship to said problem or issue, right? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be marching. I mean, I was at a march for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls when I was in Canada last week. Beautiful experience, learned a lot. I'm not saying that we don't participate in those actions. I'm saying that instead of us going out of our way to perform, to focus on actually who we are, where we are, what we're doing in relationship to the problem that we're thinking about. So when it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, some questions I need to know for myself is like, am I familiar with some of these names? Like there's some names in this community that people are saying over and over again. I need to be familiar with those stories. Is there something local that I haven't actually engaged in because I was caught up in X, Y, and Z? Like, let me understand what that is. How long has this been going on? How do they celebrate? Where can I send money? Those are things that I need to do to understand where I am situated in a particular thing. When it comes to the race question, it's also telling white folks to get out of black folks' business and say, I need you to be more concerned on how white people are instead of joining me in my black exclusive space. Right? I don't need you to be over there. I'm not looking for you over there. Don't need you over there. Don't be worried about what I'm doing. What I would love for you to do is think about you and what's happening there. Does that make sense? Yeah, so to me, that's the solidarity that we need to work with. Minding our business so deep. They're like, okay, I'm ready to engage where I need to go, how I need to go, when I need to go, because I know what I'm supposed to be doing here in support or in order for that to get that change to occur. I'm taking up way too much time. Ebony's like, but there's one more. Can we do one more?
Last one.
Okay,
No,
that's
not
last.
yet, last question. Can you raise your hand so I can see you?
Thanks. This isn't even really a question. I just wanted to add to that as a white person. So if you're new to conversations about race and you're trying to figure out where to start, I don't want to put it on Dr. Liston to have to give out resources to white people. So you want to talk about race by Ujima Aluo. I think I'm saying that close to right. Really good starting book to say, how do I as a white person start engaging about conversations about race? If you're a little further along and you want to get in deeper, The Sum of Us by Heather McGee is an incredibly good, deeper, moving into understanding mutuality and reciprocity, and Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. So there's 3 books for you, depending on where you're at. Do some of the work.
Have you read those books?
I am 70% of the way through The Sum of Us and 20% into Cast, but I've read Isabel Wilkerson's previous book,
The Warmth of Others.
The Words of Other Suns, one of my favorite books. I've read So You Want to Talk About Race twice, once with my team and then once with my husband.
Thank you. I wanted you to say that because this is what I meant by minding my business deeply. I didn't have to say any of that because she actually read those books and was like, ha, my time to tell you. Here's the books. Got them. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what it is.